Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us in the morning. With me now is James Lyons, Deputy Political Editor for the Daily Mirror, and the French-Algerian journalist and academic Nabila Ramdani. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here. First of all, let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. We'll start with the Eye, looks ahead to the Prime Minister's speech on immigration tomorrow. That's also a theme that's picked up by the Daily Mail tonight. The Daily Express warns that Easter could be the coldest on record. The Daily Telegraph predicts a house planning permission free-for-all, and under a striking wintry picture says there could be a mini heatwave by the end of spring. The FT reports on the late-night talks underway at the moment over the Cyprus bailout. The Guardian also leads on Cyprus, but also covers Boris Johnson's grilling by Eddie Mair on the BBC's Andrew Marr show. The Independent features a warning from Lord Heseltine that Britons might lack the will to secure an economic recovery. The Sun features a health and safety story with a tongue-twisting headline, which we'll attempt in a few minutes. So let's begin. We'll start, shall we, with the Indy and its take, Nabila, on immigration. Everyone's starting to talk tough on this subject, aren't they?
Well, absolutely, and I think the timing of this is not innocent. David Cameron is, of course, due to speak tomorrow to deliver his own speech on immigration, and that comes in the wake of other party leaders having spoken on the subject themselves. But I think there's an overall feeling that Cameron is trying to appeal to the immigration lobby, as there is a sense that increasingly conservative voters are attracted by a party like UKIP, for example. So it comes as no surprise that David Cameron would like to appear tougher on benefits in general, whether it is job benefits or housing benefits, and effectively trying to comfort the British working class in particular, that benefits in general should be made available first to British people, as opposed to people coming increasingly from Poland and in the near future from countries like Romania and indeed Bulgaria.
We've had a lot of advance notice of this speech, James, haven't we? And now getting an idea of just how they would try to make this ideology work in practice.
Well, the centrepiece of what David Cameron's going to be announcing tomorrow is this idea of a 6-month limit on benefits. So if you come here from other parts of the EU, you'll be allowed to claim job seekers allowance. You'll actually be able to still get it quite relatively quickly without having done a day's work here. But if you haven't found a job within 6 months, then they'll cut your money off essentially. And this is a neat way they've found of trying to get around the EU discrimination rules, which say that you can't treat people differently. And the government are arguing if you're a Briton and you don't work, then you get sanctioned, you get put on the work programme, and you get your benefits docked. And this is an extreme version of that. But I'm very glad that you came to the Independent first tonight, because as we've seen, this story is in a lot of newspapers tomorrow, but mentioned just down the bottom here, at the very bottom, it mentions a scathing report that's also out tomorrow on the border agency and the abject failure under the last two governments, actually. They're saying that there's a backlog of immigration cases that are over 300,000, which is about the size of the population of Iceland, actually, and it'll take 24 years to clear. So we've got David Cameron talking very tough, but at the same time, the safeguards and the systems we have in place simply aren't working. And I think you're going to hear Labour saying a lot more tomorrow about how he should be trying to get to grips with that, rather than indulging in this sort of arms race of rhetoric that we've seen since UKIP did so well. So
that's the Eye's take on it. We'll come to the Independent in a bit, which has another story we're going to look at. But the Daily Mail's also looking at this, Nabila, isn't it? Migrants told to find work in 6 months or there'll be no benefits. That's their headline, spelling it out, and just one of the ways in which the coalition wants to make this stick. This will appeal to voters, do you think?
Well, I think so, because I think what's changed is that the issue of immigration is no longer approached in terms of racial prejudice, but much more in terms of economic prejudice. And that's what papers are focusing on. Are British people better off than immigrants coming into this country? And I think what this shows is that David Cameron is now entering the debate into immigration without provoking the nasty party jibes that he would have received in the past. And he's well aware that immigration is an issue that's facing an awful lot of people, not just in Europe, but around the world, and he's got to have his terms of reference right.
But the problem he's got is that what draws people to Britain is not actually benefits. What draws people to Britain is the fact that they can work here and earn, and that's what most migrants come here for. And as we've found in recent years, when times have been tough, they actually go home when they can't. And I also think there's a big danger. He's trying to compete with UKIP on their territory. You know, he's never going to outflank them on immigration. He's never going to outflank them on Europe. So he's on a bit of a hiding to nothing, I'd suggest.
Let's see what he has to say and whether he pulls any surprises out of the bag tomorrow. Let's move on to the Daily Express. And the weather, again, a perennial favourite for the Express, and a rather alarming number on the front page there. I think we're all a bit sick of this cold weather, aren't we? I mean, the misery it's causing for people, we get some beautiful pictures out of it, but the problems that it's causing, particularly for people who've been without power for 3 days now, just shows how...
And it is a serious problem for a lot of older people who can't get out in this kind of weather, and a lot of people maybe a bit iller, and you know they will be scared. And a lot of people, obviously, of course, as well, with what we've seen with energy bills, are worried about heating their homes, and they'll read headlines like this and they'll be very, very frightened.
And it's not over yet.
It's not over yet, and in fact, it's looking increasingly problematic in practical terms. I mean, they say that British people talk a lot about the weather, but this is a serious weather story. Here we are just a few days away from Easter, and yet, you know, snow is still falling, roads are blocked, flights are cancelled, trains are disrupted, schools are shut, and, you know, a couple of days ago we had stories about gas supplies being limited. Electricity is cut in thousands of households, and we are being warned now to look after, you know, the most vulnerable members of society who are at risk because of severe weather conditions. So there's quite a long list of concerns, you know, attributed to these horrible weather conditions, frankly.
The Daily Telegraph is probably trying to lift our spirits a bit. It's got a picture of a very beautiful snowy Ludlow in Shropshire, but also saying that the Met Office thinks there could be a heat wave by the end of spring.
This is a bit of a blow, really, isn't it, with their record? I mean, I think the Telegraph points out, you know, it was the infamous barbecue summer that they forecast 3 or 4 years ago, when, frankly, the only thing that you could use your barbecue for was paddling around the garden, wasn't it? It was that wet. So, who knows? Maybe even a stop clock is right, you know, twice a day, and they've got it right this time, and there is a bit more something to look forward to around the corner.
It'll help keep my chin up, that's for sure. I hope they're right. Let's take a look at The Guardian then, and Boris Johnson's experience this morning on the Andrew Marr show with Eddie Mair in charge.
Yes.
Did you feel for him?
No. I was glued along with all my colleagues down in Westminster to this interview this morning. Boris Johnson is always good news value, but I think this morning was the morning that his past really caught up with him. He trades on being the cheeky chappie that no one takes quite seriously, but this morning he was treated very seriously indeed, and he didn't like it one little bit. There's a whole string of things from his past, lies about an affair, a very bizarre conversation with a criminal friend of his about whether or not he supplied the address of a journalist that this chap wanted beating up, and lots of other stuff besides. And I think really that there is
making up a quote.
Making up a quote, indeed. An absolutely outrageous offence as a journalist, making up a quote and getting sacked for it. Now, there is a serious point to this. It was great sport for those of us in the Westminster Village, but this is a man who really thinks he can make it all the way. He's going to say in a documentary, a BBC documentary tomorrow, that he would actually like a crack at being Prime Minister. And I think a lot of Tory MPs who are quite nervous about the prospect of Boris as their leader anyway, will take one look at this and think, well, you know, he just can't possibly do the job. This is going to haunt him every moment that he would be in it. How
damaging do you think it was, this interview, Nabila,
for
him?
Given by the reactions that it triggered on social medias like Twitter, for example, it was pretty damaging indeed. I mean, he's fairly popular as Mayor of London. He comes across as an amicable figure, you know, always dishevelled, and people like his casual mannerisms, but failing to answer very serious questions, and especially for someone who has very serious political ambitions, he came across very badly because of that, and his image has definitely suffered.
For a moment, forget the allegations. The fact that he couldn't answer them coherently or sensibly or convincingly is incredibly damning.
It's always interesting, isn't it, how coy politicians become when they're asked if they want to be Prime Minister.
Yes, yes, isn't it?
But to be fair on him, he couldn't, I don't know, I don't think it's the timing is right to say, right, I want to take over from David Cameron.
Yeah, it's difficult to know which day of the year he'd feel happy to say that. Let's take a look at The Independent. And Lord Heseltine saying that we're all a bit too comfy, so we're not going to sort of pull out the stops and get ourselves out of recession. Is that right? I don't know that many people are feeling particularly flush at the moment.
I would say, I mean, I think, you know, it does make Lord Heseltine, dare I say it, look rather out of touch, doesn't it? I mean, I know he's a very wealthy man, but I don't think that very many other people in the country at the moment feel that they are particularly rich or feel that they should be working harder. Of course, this is a refrain we've heard from lots of Conservatives. We heard this from William Hague, from Eric Pickles, the idea that the rest of us all need to work harder to get us out of recession. It's not the government's fault for pursuing their disastrous economic policies. It's the fact that none of us are grafting hard enough, and we all need to put our noses to the grindstone and you know, and get down and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.
Would anyone at the Daily Mirror ever admit that the reason they're having to pursue these policies, or they started off pursuing these policies, because of the mess they were left in by the Labour Party?
It was a horrendous mess caused by the failure to regulate the banks properly, which obviously
but the debt was enormous. But the debt was enormous.
If you just let me finish my point. There was a big problem because the banks weren't regulated properly. Now that's an entirely fair criticism of Labour's record in office, and one that they fully admit to. The problem for the Tories is all the way through they were arguing for less regulation, and right up until the last minute they were matching Labour's spending plans. So
do we just work harder and that'll be the end of it?
Well, I think very few people would argue with his point that economic recovery, as he puts it, it's not essential. It doesn't need to be, and it can go on drifting down. And my feeling was, when reading that, was he effectively trying to provide a cover for potential failure by Osborne to fix the economy, and also his prediction that, you know, he says that, you know, the richer you get, the less imperative there is to get the economy back on track.
Is there truth in that, do you think? We become complacent if we get too comfortable?
Well, famously, rich people want to get richer. They don't give up on willing to becoming rich.
If you're driven that way, you stay that way. Let's take a look at the Telegraph again, and they're talking about this planning free-for-all beginning, where house building approvals are apparently surging as the planning system is relaxed somewhat, and this is causing a lot of problems. There have been warnings from the National Trust in particular, haven't there, about the mess it's going to cause, particularly in rural areas? Well,
I mean, the Telegraph obviously seem very upset about this, but I think it's fantastic. We finally got some good news. Here we are, a country without enough houses, construction industry on its knees, people particularly in rural communities getting priced out of the market, all problems that will be made worse by the bizarre mortgage scheme announced by the Chancellor in the budget last week. And here we have some fantastic news that the government's reforms are going to mean that we're going to have some new homes built, some people in work, and hopefully some nice places to live at the end of it.
Isn't the issue where they're built and what they look like?
I think the caveat in this piece is that, as it's put by who's saying that, Clive Betts, chairman of the Commons communities and local government community, he says that the danger is that we end up leaving brownfield sites empty, where people would welcome development, and would on greenfield sites when people would be unhappy about it. So that perhaps that's the danger of where do you actually build these new developments.
Let's finally look at this tongue twister of a headline in The Sun, which I'll try and say: flapjack, whack, rap, claptrap. Then you have to work out what it actually means. James, can you tell us?
I think I've got to the bottom of it. I think. And it's a story that really does take the biscuit. It's,
very good.
Dinner ladies...
I've had all evening to think of that. Well done, very good.
Dinner ladies have been banned from baking triangular flapjacks, and they've told they've got to do bake squares instead.
Why is that?
I think they could have someone's eye out. Is that I think that's what my mum always used to say. I am struggling to work out what the children at this school eat with, because presumably knives and forks have been banned.
That's true, yeah.
Breadsticks are quite dangerous. Maybe jelly.
Chopsticks wouldn't be any good either.
Chopsticks would be lethal, wouldn't they? So
in fact, it's hard to think of anything that you couldn't cause some damage with.
I have to admit, it reminds me of an old joke from my school days, which is, what's yellow and dangerous?
I don't know.
Shark-infested custard. Probably go very nicely with flapjack.
I don't know whether that's allowed anymore. What do you make of it? Would this be a story that France would even bother with, Nabila?
Well, I think they would focus on the health concerns around flapjack if there was to be a story about flapjacks at all. But potentially, you know, any object can be used as a weapon, a dangerous...
You might break your tooth if it was baked too long. James and Nabila, thank you very much indeed. That's our look at the papers for tonight. Very big thank you to our reviewers, James Lyons from the Daily Mirror and Nabila Ramdani. We'll do it all again tomorrow evening, but stay with BBC News. Coming up next is the film review.